During her company's ceremony, my daughter called me on stage and said, "This is my mother, my biggest lesson on how not to raise a daughter." The surprise came when she received a letter from the main investor. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I smoothed my navy blue dress, the one I'd saved 3 months to buy, and adjusted the simple pearl necklace around my neck. At 65, I wasn't trying to impress anyone, but today was special. Today was Savannah's day, and I wanted to look my best for her. The ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel buzzed with excitement. Business people in expensive suits mingled, champagne glasses clinked, and promotional videos of Savannah's company played on massive screens. I clutched my invitation, my heart swelling with pride. My daughter, CEO of Horizon Innovations, being honored as Businesswoman of the Year. A young woman with a clipboard approached me. "Are you Mrs. Wilson?" "Yes, that's me. Cathy Wilson. Ms. Montclair mentioned you would be attending. Please follow me to your seat." I followed her through the crowd, noting how some people glanced at me curiously. My simple dress stood out among their designer clothes, but I didn't care. I was here for Savannah. The woman led me to a table near the front. "Ms. Montclair requested you sit here," she said with a smile. My heart fluttered. After years of strained phone calls and missed holidays, Savannah wanted me close. Maybe things were finally changing. The ceremony began with speeches from various business leaders. I barely listened, my eyes fixed on the side entrance where Savannah would appear. When she finally walked onto the stage, the room erupted in applause. My baby girl, though at 42 hardly a baby anymore, looked stunning in her tailored black suit, her auburn hair falling in perfect waves just past her shoulders. "Thank you all for this honor," she began, her voice confident and clear. "Success never happens in isolation, and I wouldn't be here without the influences that shaped me." She spoke about mentors and colleagues, her voice warm with gratitude. I listened, hands clasped tightly in my lap, wondering if she might mention me too. Then she paused, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found mine. "I'd like to recognize someone special here tonight," she said. My heart nearly stopped. "Mom, would you please join me on stage?" A spotlight found me, and the crowd applauded. Trembling slightly, I made my way to the stage, conscious of every eye in the room. Savannah extended her hand to help me up the steps, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "This is my mother, Cathy Wilson," she announced, her arm around my shoulders. I smiled, blinking back tears of joy. But then her grip tightened almost imperceptibly. "My mother taught me my most valuable lesson in business and in life," Savannah continued. "She showed me exactly how not to raise a daughter." The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. "From her, I learned that absence doesn't make the heart grow fonder," Savannah said, her voice taking on an edge I recognized from our worst arguments. "I learned that empty promises break more than just plans. I learned that some people will always put work before family, money before memories." Each word hit like a physical blow. I stood frozen, unable to move or speak. So today, as I accept this award, I thank my mother for showing me everything I never wanted to be, for teaching me through her failures rather than her successes. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people looked away, embarrassed for me. Others watched with the morbid fascination of witnessing a car crash. "You can return to your seat now, Mom," Savannah said quietly, the microphone no longer picking up her words. Her eyes were cold, triumphant. Somehow I made it off the stage without falling. My legs moved automatically while my mind screamed. The walk back to my table felt endless, each step carrying me through a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I grabbed my purse and headed for the exit, dignity crumbling with each step. Behind me, I heard Savannah continuing her speech as if nothing had happened. Near the door, I bumped into an elderly man in an expensive suit. He steadied me with a gentle hand. "Mrs. Wilson?" he asked, his eyes kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. I nodded, unable to speak. "I'm Harrison Roberts," he said, "the primary investor in your daughter's company." I tried to smile politely, but my lips trembled. "I have something for Savannah," he said, producing an envelope from his jacket pocket. "But I think I'll wait. This doesn't seem like the right moment." As I fled the ballroom, the sound of applause followed me, celebrating the daughter who had just publicly destroyed her mother. In the taxi home, I finally let the tears come. 30 years of sacrifices, of working 3 jobs, of going hungry so Savannah could eat, of postponing dreams so she could pursue hers, all painted as neglect and failure in front of hundreds of people. What hurt most wasn't the humiliation. It was knowing that somewhere along the way, I had lost my daughter completely, and I had no idea how to get her back. The morning after the ceremony, I awoke in my small apartment, my eyes swollen from crying. For a moment I hoped it had all been a nightmare. But the navy dress draped over my chair confirmed the truth. My daughter had humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. I made coffee in the chipped mug Savannah had painted for me on Mother's Day when she was 8. Before everything changed. Before life hardened her heart against me. The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Probably Martha from next door. News traveled fast, and she always watched these business award ceremonies on local TV. "Hello, Mrs. Wilson. This is Harrison Roberts, the investor from last night." I straightened instinctively, though he couldn't see me. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he continued. "I wanted to check if you were all right after." "What happened?" "I'm fine," I lied, my voice betraying me with a slight crack. "I don't believe you," he said gently. "No one would be fine after that. I'm sorry you experienced such unkindness." His compassion nearly broke me again. I gripped the counter to steady myself. "Why are you calling, Mr. Roberts?" "I've known your daughter professionally for 5 years," he said. "But I've known about you much longer." Before I could ask what he meant, memories flooded back, washing over me like a bitter tide. 28 years ago. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" 6-year-old Savannah stood in our kitchen, clutching her teddy bear. Her eyes were puffy from crying. I knelt before her, brushing hair from her face. "Daddy's gone, sweetheart. He won't be coming back." Did I make him leave? Her voice was so small. "No, baby. Never think that." I pulled her close, inhaling the sweet scent of her shampoo. "Daddy has problems that make him not himself sometimes." I couldn't tell her the whole truth, that her father's alcoholism had escalated, that last night he'd thrown a bottle at my head, that I'd finally found the courage to kick him out after years of abuse. "Will we be okay without him?" Savannah asked. "Yes," I promised, though I had no idea how I'd manage. "I'll take care of everything." And I did. I took extra shifts at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. When that wasn't enough, I cleaned houses on weekends and waited tables at night. I left before dawn and returned after Savannah was asleep, relying on my elderly neighbor Mrs. Peterson to watch her. I missed school plays and parent-teacher conferences. I missed dinners and bedtime stories. But we had food on the table, a roof over our heads, and most importantly, no more drunken rages, no more bruises to hide, no more walking on eggshells. Savannah didn't understand. How could she? All she knew was that her mother was never around. By the time she was 12, the sweet little girl who once greeted me with hugs had transformed into a sullen preteen who barely acknowledged me. "You promised you'd come to my recital," she accused one night, arms crossed as I dragged myself through the door after a 16-hour shift. "I'm sorry, baby. Mrs. Holloway went into labor, and there was no one else." "There's never anyone else. It's always work, work, work with you. Savannah, please understand. I hate you," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "Dad would have been there." The words cut deeper than she knew. Her father wouldn't have been there. He'd have been passed out drunk somewhere, if he was even still alive. I hadn't heard from him since he left, though child support checks occasionally arrived, just enough to keep Savannah believing he cared. Harrison's voice pulled me back to the present. "Mrs. Wilson, are you still there?" "Yes," I whispered. "I'm sorry. No need to apologize. I wanted to tell you that I'm meeting with Savannah tomorrow. I delivered that envelope after you left." My heart clenched. What was in it? "The truth," he said simply, "about why I invested in her company." "I don't understand." "You will, Mrs. Wilson. So will she." He paused. "The narrative we accept about our lives isn't always the whole story. Savannah only knows her version of your shared history." After we hung up, I sat at my small kitchen table, turning his words over in my mind. What did he know about our past? What truth could possibly change the hatred I'd seen in my daughter's eyes? My gaze fell on the photo album I kept on the bookshelf. I hadn't opened it in years, too painful to see those memories frozen in time. Happier days that seemed to belong to someone else's life. I pulled it into my lap, dust scattering as I opened the cover. The first photo showed me holding newborn Savannah, my face tired but radiant with joy. Page after page documented her childhood, birthday parties I'd scraped together between shifts, Christmas mornings with presents I'd worked overtime to afford, graduation ceremonies I'd begged supervisors to let me attend. There were gaps, of course, the moments I'd missed, the milestones witnessed by neighbors or babysitters while I worked to keep us afloat. But there was love in these pages. So much love. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. We need to talk. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. My office. Savannah. I stared at the message, my heart racing. After last night I should refuse. Protect what little dignity I had left. But she was my daughter. My only child. And some small foolish part of me still hoped that whatever was in that envelope might finally help her understand. Horizon Innovations occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming skyscraper downtown. A world away from my modest apartment in the suburbs. I stood in the lobby, clutching my worn purse, feeling every bit the outsider in my simple blue blouse and slacks. Mrs. Wilson? A young receptionist approached. Miss Montclair is expecting you. I'll escort you up. The elevator ride was silent and tense. I caught my reflection in the polished doors, gray hair neatly combed, lines etched around my eyes and mouth. When had I gotten so old? Savannah's office took up half the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and sleek furniture in muted grays and blues created an atmosphere of understated power. My daughter sat behind an enormous glass desk, phone pressed to her ear. She held up one finger without looking at me, continuing her conversation as if I weren't there. I don't care what the projections say, Paul. We're not compromising on quality to meet arbitrary deadlines. She paused, listening. Then find someone who can deliver. That's what I pay you for. She hung up, finally turning her attention to me. You came. Her voice was neutral, professional, the voice she probably used with vendors who disappointed her. You asked me to. I remained standing, unwilling to sit until invited. Have a seat. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. No hug, no warmth. Just business. I sat, placing my purse carefully on my lap. Why am I here, Savannah? She opened a drawer and removed a familiar envelope, the one Harrison Roberts had mentioned. This, she said, sliding it across the desk. Did you know about this? I shook my head. I don't know what it contains. It's a letter. From Harrison Roberts. She watched me closely, looking for any sign of deception. He claims he invested in my company because of you. My confusion must have been evident because she continued, her voice tinged with suspicion. He says he was a patient at Mercy Hospital 20 years ago. Says you were his nurse during cancer treatment. Her eyes narrowed. He says you saved his life. The name suddenly clicked into place. Mr. Roberts in room 302, I murmured. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors had given up. Savannah's expression faltered for a split second. So it's true. I was his night nurse for nearly 6 months. Memories surfaced slowly. He wasn't responding to treatment. I noticed his medication wasn't being properly adjusted. I spoke to the doctors, but they dismissed me. Just a nurse questioning their expertise. What did you do? I contacted an oncologist at Johns Hopkins who'd published a paper on a new approach. Sent him Mr. Roberts' charts. He confirmed my suspicions. I shrugged slightly. I convinced Mr. Roberts to seek a second opinion with this doctor. Savannah leaned forward. And that saved him? Apparently so. He transferred to Johns Hopkins the next week. I never saw him again. I met her gaze steadily. What does this have to do with your company? Savannah's jaw tightened. According to this letter, he's been looking for you for years. When he saw my last name and hometown on a business proposal, he investigated. Discovered I was your daughter. So he invested because of me? The idea seemed absurd. He writes that he wanted to repay you by supporting your daughter. Her voice turned bitter. Says you worked 3 jobs to put me through college. That you went without eating some days so I could have what I needed. The sudden shift in her tone confused me. Why did this information make her angry? Is that true? She demanded. Yes. Then why didn't you ever tell me? She stood abruptly, pacing behind her desk. Why did you let me believe you were absent because you didn't care? I never wanted to burden you with. Burden me. She whirled to face me. You thought knowing my mother was sacrificing everything for me would be a burden? That's not what My entire life I thought you chose work over me. That I wasn't important enough for your time. Her voice cracked slightly. Do you know what that does to a child? Pain lanced through my chest. Savannah, I was trying to give you a better life than I had. By never being there? She laughed harshly. Great strategy, Mom. I was there every moment I could be. I fought to keep my voice steady. But someone had to pay the bills. Someone had to put food on the table. Dad sent child support. The naive statement nearly broke me. It wasn't enough, Savannah. Not nearly enough. Then why didn't you ask him for more? Her eyes flashed with the stubborn righteousness of someone who didn't know the whole story. I took a deep breath. 20 years of protecting her from the truth, and where had it gotten us? Because I was afraid of him, I said quietly. She stopped pacing. What? Your father was. I searched for words that wouldn't shatter her image of him completely. He had problems. Serious problems. What problems? Her voice held a warning note. Before I could answer, her office door opened. Harrison Roberts entered, looking apologetic. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said. But your assistant said you needed me for the board call in 5 minutes. Savannah straightened, professional mask slipping back into place. Yes, thank you, Harrison. He nodded to me. Mrs. Wilson. Good to see you again. As he turned to leave, Savannah called after him. Why didn't you tell me all this in person? Why the letter? Harrison paused at the door. Some truths need to be absorbed privately, not performed publicly. His gentle rebuke hung in the air as he left. Savannah turned back to me, conflict evident in her eyes. This conversation isn't over. I have questions. I have answers, I replied softly. When you're ready to hear them. As I gathered my purse to leave, she said, Come to my house tomorrow night. 7 o'clock. She wrote an address on a business card and handed it to me. We'll finish this conversation properly. Walking out of that towering building, I felt a strange mixture of dread and hope. For 20 years, I'd protected Savannah from the ugly truth about her father. Tomorrow those protective walls would finally come down. Savannah's house was exactly what I expected. A sprawling modern structure of glass and steel perched on a hillside overlooking the city. As I pulled my aging Toyota into the circular driveway, I felt the familiar ache of inadequacy that always accompanied visits to my daughter's world. A housekeeper answered the door, leading me through an immaculate living room to a patio where Savannah sat with a glass of wine, staring out at the twinkling city lights below. You're on time, she said without turning around. Not a greeting, just an observation. I'm always on time when I know I can be. I remained standing until she finally gestured to the chair across from her. Wine, she offered, already pouring a second glass. Thank you. I took it, more for something to do with my hands than from any desire to drink. For a long moment we sat in silence. Mother and daughter, strangers to each other despite sharing the same blood. The same blue eyes, the same stubborn chin. I've been thinking about what Harrison said. Savannah finally began. About you working 3 jobs. I nodded, taking a small sip of wine. I remember you were always tired. Always coming home late. Her voice held no accusation now, just thoughtfulness. I remember being angry about it. You had every right to be, I said softly. You were a child. You needed your mother. But I had you. Just not the way I wanted. She set her glass down. Harrison says you worked double shifts at the hospital, then cleaned houses on weekends, and waited tables at night. That's right. Why? Dad's child support wasn't that bad. I saw the checks. She frowned. And we lived in that small house, drove old cars. Where did all the money go? The moment had come. After decades of protecting her, of carrying this burden alone, it was time for the truth. Your father's checks were small and inconsistent, I began carefully. But you're right, we could have managed better on what he sent. If that had been all there was to it. Savannah leaned forward. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. When you were 5, I finally found the courage to ask your father to leave. Because of his drinking, she said. You told me that much. Yes, the drinking. But there was more. I met her eyes steadily. Your father was abusive, Savannah. Not just verbally. Physically. She flinched as if I'd struck her. No. He wouldn't. The night I asked him to leave, he threw a whiskey bottle at my head. I still have the scar. I pushed back my hair to reveal the thin white line near my temple. It wasn't the first time, but I decided it would be the last. Savannah's face had gone pale. Why didn't you ever tell me? You adored him. Even after he left, you kept his picture by your bed. My voice softened with the memory. What kind of mother would I be if I destroyed that image? If I turned a daughter against her father? A truthful one, she whispered, but there was less conviction in her voice now. Maybe, but I chose to protect you instead. I took another sip of wine, needing the fortification. What I didn't know was that your father had taken out loans in my name. Lots of them. When he left, those debts became mine. Understanding dawned in her eyes. So all that work was to pay off his debts while still giving you a decent life. I nodded. The bank threatened to take our house. I had bill collectors calling at all hours. I was drowning, Savannah. You could have declared bankruptcy. And lost everything? Where would we have gone? I shook my head. Besides, your father threatened to fight for custody if I didn't pay what he called his fair share. He knew people at the courthouse had friends in the police department. In those days, his word against mine. I trailed off, the old fear momentarily resurfacing. He wouldn't have won, Savannah insisted, but doubt clouded her features. I couldn't take that chance. I couldn't lose you. My voice broke slightly. So I worked. I paid. I did what I had to do. But the late nights, the missed school events. I tried, Savannah. God knows I tried to be there for everything. But sometimes I had to choose between working an extra shift so we could keep the electricity on, or attending a school play. Tears pricked at my eyes. Those choices broke my heart every single time. Savannah stood abruptly, walking to the edge of the patio. Her back to me, shoulders rigid, she asked, "Why didn't Dad ever visit after he left?" He sent cards, presents. But he never came to see me. The question I dreaded most. The final piece of the ugly truth. Because I got a restraining order after he broke into our house and threatened to kill me if I didn't give him more money. The words fell between us like stones. He wasn't allowed within 500 feet of either of us. She turned slowly, eyes wide with shock. What? The cards and presents came through his sister. The few times he called, I let you talk to him because I couldn't bear to see you cry when you asked for him. I stood too, needing to move. It nearly killed me. Letting you believe I was the villain while he was some kind of hero who just couldn't be there. All those years. Savannah's voice was barely audible. I blamed you for keeping him away. I thought you drove him off with your coldness. I know. The admission hurt, but it was nothing compared to the years of silent suffering. And when I got older, I resented you for never being around. Her eyes filled with tears. I built my entire identity around not being like you. Around being present, being involved, being the opposite of what you thought I was, I finished for her. She nodded, tears spilling onto her cheeks. I built my company to prove I could succeed where you had failed. To show I could have everything you couldn't give me. And you've done brilliantly. Pride swelled in my chest despite everything. You've created something remarkable, Savannah. Based on a lie. She wiped angrily at her tears. Based on hating you for something that wasn't even true. I moved toward her, stopping just short of reaching out. You didn't know. I should have asked. I should have looked deeper. She met my gaze, her eyes red but clear. Instead, I humiliated you in front of hundreds of people. The memory of that night still stung, but standing here, finally speaking truths buried for decades, the pain seemed less important. We both made mistakes, I said gently. We both kept secrets we thought would protect the other. Savannah looked at me for a long moment, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. I need time, she said finally. To process all this. To rethink everything I thought I knew. I nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need. As I turned to leave, her voice stopped me. Mom. I looked back. Thank you for telling me the truth. Finally. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was a beginning. 3 weeks passed without a word from Savannah. I tried to resume my normal routine, volunteering at the senior center, tending my small garden, meeting friends for coffee, but my mind constantly returned to our conversation, wondering if I'd said too much or not enough. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I was sorting through old photo albums when my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Harrison Roberts standing on my porch, his silver hair damp from the rain. Mrs. Wilson. He greeted me with a warm smile. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, I said, surprised. Please come in. I led him to my modest living room, suddenly conscious of the worn furniture and faded curtains. He didn't seem to notice, his attention caught by the photos spread across my coffee table. Family memories? He asked, gesturing to the albums. Yes. I was just reminiscing. I gathered the photos hastily. Can I offer you some tea? That would be lovely. When I returned with 2 steaming mugs, Harrison was examining a framed photo of Savannah at her high school graduation, me standing awkwardly beside her, both of us smiling stiffly for the camera. She looks so much like you, he observed. She has her father's ambition, I replied, setting down the tea. Harrison's expression grew serious. That's partly why I'm here, Mrs. Wilson. I spoke with Savannah yesterday. My heart skipped a beat. How is she? Processing. What you told her has shaken her world quite thoroughly. He sipped his tea thoughtfully. She asked me about the time I was your patient. Wanted to know what kind of nurse you were. And what did you tell her? The truth. That you were attentive when others were dismissive. Thorough when others cut corners. That you noticed things about my condition that even the doctors missed. His eyes crinkled with a kind smile. I told her how you'd check on me during your breaks, even when you weren't assigned to my room. How you'd bring me extra blankets when the night chills set in. Memories of those long hospital nights flooded back. The endless rounds, the aching feet, the constant worry about leaving Savannah with neighbors for yet another shift. I was just doing my job, I said quietly. No, Mrs. Wilson. You were doing far more than your job. Harrison set his mug down firmly. I also told Savannah how I once saw you crying in the stairwell during your break. How you were looking at a child's drawing, a school play program, I believe. You'd missed it, hadn't you? My throat tightened. Savannah's 5th grade musical. She played the lead. You worked a double shift that night to cover for a colleague who had called in sick. You didn't want the unit short-staffed for the overnight patients. Harrison's gaze was gentle but direct. You never told Savannah that, did you? I shook my head. What would have been the point? I still wasn't there when she needed me. The point, Mrs. Wilson, is that you weren't absent by choice. You were torn between impossible demands, being a provider and being present. He leaned forward. Savannah needed to hear that. Not from you, but from someone who witnessed it firsthand. And did she believe you? I think she's beginning to see a different picture than the one she's carried all these years. He hesitated. There's something else. She asked me about her father. My chest tightened. What about him? She wanted confirmation of what you told her. About the abuse, the threats. And how could you possibly confirm that? You never met him. Harrison's expression grew somber. No, but I knew your supervisor at Mercy Hospital. Margaret Stevens. We've remained friends over the years. The name hit me like a physical blow. Margaret had been the only person at the hospital who knew the full extent of what I was going through. The one who helped me get the restraining order, who rearranged my schedule when hiding from my ex-husband became necessary. Margaret told her everything, didn't she? I whispered. Harrison nodded. Savannah called her the day after your talk. Margaret confirmed your story and added details you probably protected Savannah from. I closed my eyes briefly, imagining that conversation. I never wanted Savannah to know how bad it really was. That was your choice as a mother. Harrison's voice held no judgment. But now that she does know, it's changing how she sees the past. How she sees you. We sat in silence for a moment. rain pattering against the windows, the weight of decades of misunderstanding hanging between us. Why did you really invest in her company? I finally asked. It couldn't just have been gratitude for my nursing care. Harrison smiled. When I first looked into Horizon Innovations, I was merely curious about the connection to you. But then I saw the actual business plan, the innovation behind it. Savannah is brilliant in her own right. He shrugged slightly. My investment was sound business. The fact that it helped your daughter was a happy bonus. And the letter? Why now after all these years? His expression grew serious again. Because I saw how she spoke about you at previous events. The thinly veiled resentment. I recognized it because I once felt the same way about my own mother. He sighed. I waited too long to reconcile with mine. I didn't want Savannah to make the same mistake. After Harrison left, I sat among the scattered photos, memories rearranging themselves into a new pattern. 4 years, I'd accepted Savannah's version of our story, that I had failed her as a mother. I'd carried that guilt so long it had become part of me. But perhaps there was another version. One where I had done the best I could with impossible choices. One where protection and provision were also forms of love, even when they didn't look like the bedtime stories and school plays I'd missed. The next morning my phone chimed with a text message from Savannah. Dinner tonight? My place. 6:30. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Then I typed, I'll be there. As I drove to her house that evening, I realized I was heading toward something I'd given up hoping for. Not just reconciliation, but understanding. The chance to be seen finally for who I really was. Not perfect. Not a hero. Just a mother who had loved her daughter enough to carry the heaviest burdens alone. 6 months after that fateful award ceremony, I sat in the back of a crowded auditorium, watching as Savannah prepared to address her company's annual leadership conference. The event was smaller than the awards dinner but no less prestigious. These were the people who worked directly under her, who helped build her vision into reality. I'd slipped in quietly, not wanting to disturb anything. Savannah had invited me, but I still felt like an outsider in her professional world. Better to observe from a distance than risk another public misstep. The last 6 months had been a slow, careful rebuilding. Weekly dinners at first, slightly awkward but increasingly comfortable as we navigated our new understanding of each other. Savannah had questions, so many questions about the past. I answered them all, no longer hiding behind protective half-truths. She'd cried when I finally showed her the stack of medical bills from the time her father had put me in the hospital. She'd gone silent when I revealed how I pawned my mother's jewelry to pay for her senior class trip. Each revelation seemed to heal something in her, even as it created a new kind of pain, the pain of realizing how wrong she'd been. I don't know how to make this right, she'd admitted during one of our dinners. How do I apologize for 20 years of blame? You don't need to, I told her. Understanding is enough. But for Savannah, understanding was never enough. She was her mother's daughter after all, stubborn, determined, unwilling to leave things unresolved. Now, as she stepped up to the podium, I wondered what this invitation had really been about. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. Welcome everyone, Savannah began, her voice strong and clear. Before we dive into business projections and strategic planning, I want to talk about something more fundamental. Something I've been rethinking over the past few months. She paused, scanning the crowd. Her eyes found mine in the back row, and a small smile crossed her face. Many of you were at the Businesswoman of the Year ceremony 6 months ago, she continued. You heard me speak about influences and lessons. Some of you witnessed a moment I'm not proud of, when I publicly criticized my mother. A knot formed in my throat. I hadn't expected this. What you don't know is that I built that speech, and much of my life philosophy, on a misunderstanding. Her voice softened. I believed a story about my childhood that wasn't entirely true. I blamed someone who deserved gratitude. I mistook sacrifice for absence. The audience was utterly silent now, captivated by this unexpected turn. My mother is here today, Savannah said, gesturing toward the back of the room. Mom, would you please join me? All heads turned. For a moment I couldn't move, memories of that earlier public humiliation paralyzing me. But the look in Savannah's eyes was different now, warm, inviting, tinged with something like reverence. Slowly, I made my way to the stage. Savannah extended her hand, just as she had 6 months ago. But this time when I reached her, she pulled me into a tight embrace. "Thank you for coming," she whispered before turning back to the microphone. "I want everyone to meet Cathy Wilson. Not just my mother, but the woman who taught me the most important lesson in business and in life. One I didn't understand until recently." I stood beside her, hands clasped tightly in front of me, acutely aware of all the eyes watching us. "My mother worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads," Savannah told the audience. "She went without meals so I could eat. She missed school events not because I wasn't important, but because keeping me safe and secure was even more important." She turned to look at me, her eyes bright with emotion. "I built Horizon Innovations on the principle that presence matters, that being visible and engaged is essential to leadership. And that's true." She smiled slightly. "But my mother taught me something more profound. That true leadership sometimes means making the hardest sacrifices behind the scenes, with no recognition. It means doing what's necessary, not what's popular." Tears pricked my eyes. I blinked them back, determined not to break down in front of all these people. "Some of you have heard me say that success requires unwavering focus," Savannah continued. "That's still true. But what I failed to acknowledge is that sometimes the focus isn't on your own advancement, but on creating opportunities for others to advance." She reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "My mother focused on giving me a future, even when it cost her the present. She chose my security over her comfort, my opportunities over her own." Savannah's voice wavered slightly. "That's not a lesson in how not to parent. That's a masterclass in love." The applause started slowly, then built until it filled the auditorium. But I barely heard it over the roaring in my ears. After decades of quiet sacrifice, of being misunderstood and blamed, of accepting the role of villain in my daughter's story, finally the truth. Savannah raised her hand, quieting the crowd. "In honor of my mother's example, I'm announcing a new initiative today. The Cathy Wilson Scholarship Fund will provide educational opportunities for children of single parents, with priority given to families dealing with domestic violence." She turned to me, her professional composure briefly cracking. "It's not enough, Mom. It doesn't make up for what I said, what I believed. But it's a start." Later, at a small reception following the conference, Harrison Roberts approached us, champagne flutes in hand. "Well done," he said, offering us each a glass. "Both of you." Savannah smiled. "I couldn't have done it without your letter, Harrison. You gave me the first piece of a puzzle I didn't even know I needed to solve." "I just provided information," he replied. "You did the hard work of reconsidering deeply held beliefs. Not everyone is brave enough for that." As they continued talking, I stepped slightly away, needing a moment to process everything. The scholarship announcement had caught me completely by surprise. That Savannah would attach my name to something so meaningful, so aligned with our shared history. It was more recognition than I'd ever sought or expected. "Mom." Savannah appeared at my side. "Are you okay?" "Just overwhelmed," I admitted. "It's been quite a day." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I have one more thing to show you, if you're up for it." Curious, I followed her to her office on the top floor. On her desk sat a framed photograph I'd never seen before. Savannah and me at her college graduation, one of the few ceremonies I'd managed to attend. In the photo, I looked exhausted but proud, my arm around her shoulders. "I found this while going through old boxes," she explained. "I don't remember ever displaying it." "You were angry with me that day," I recalled softly. "I was late to the ceremony because my car broke down on the way. I remember." She picked up the frame, running her finger along the edge. "What I didn't know was that you'd worked a night shift, then taken 3 buses to get there after your car failed." I shrugged slightly. "You were graduating college, the first in our family. Wild horses couldn't have kept me away." Savannah placed the photo carefully on her desk, positioning it prominently beside her computer. "This stays here now, to remind me of what really matters." As we left her office, she looped her arm through mine, a casual gesture that felt monumental in its significance. We weren't fully healed. 20 years of misunderstanding couldn't be erased in 6 months. There would still be difficult conversations, painful memories, moments of doubt. But walking beside my daughter, Feeling the warmth of her arm linked with mine, I knew we had found our way back to each other. Not through grand gestures or public declarations, though today had certainly included those, but through the harder, quieter work of truth-telling and listening, of seeing each other not as the characters we'd cast in our personal narratives, but as flawed, loving humans doing our best with the circumstances we'd been given. And in the end, isn't that the most any of us can ask for? Not perfect understanding, not complete redemption, just the chance to be seen finally for who we really are.